And it is especially disgusting to me that Jim Bob and Michelle did this not out of ignorance, not out of a lack of resources, or because they're a family who grew up in poverty or didn't know any better, or there was generational trauma and they're doing the best that they could with the circumstances that they had. They could have done better. They chose not to because it was convenient for them. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey. I'm a therapist and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different because we're talking about the Duggar family, but we're doing it in a little bit of a different way than we've done before. We're trying out a new format on the channel. The Duggar family is one of those things that's just a very big topic. There's lots of nuance here. There's lots of layers here. And so it felt like a good thing for us to debut a little bit of a different format because I want to try doing deep dives about topics like this that are bigger, like harder for me to wrap up into a 15-minute video. And so this one's going to be a little bit longer. It's going to be a little bit more in depth because, like I said, it is just a lot of information, but this is also like a very serious topic, and so it felt like a good fit for that reason too. So I want to be super clear off the bat. We need to put up several trigger warnings for this video. There may be pockets of humor here and there because that's how I deal with things, and I also think it's helpful to move the video along. But this video has like a strong trigger warning for SA, for CA, for CSA, for abuse generally, for parentification, for religious trauma, for family trauma, generational trauma, lots and lots and lots of very heavy subject matter is happening here. So if that's not a topic that feels safe for you, if that's not something that you are okay to hear about, talk about, engage with, I will put a playlist up here of like fun eye bleach, like happy fun times type of stuff. Please go watch that. Please take care of yourself. That's the most important thing. So yeah, I just want to be super clear about that. I also want to give a quick caveat right off the bat because it seems like these are very necessary for some reason, despite the fact that we've done many of these types of videos. When we talk about religious fundamentalism on this channel, this is never intended to be a critique or a commentary or a deep dive into regular religious people generally. This is meant to be a video about the Duggar family specifically. I think it's very important for us to call out problematic behavior and problematic belief systems where they exist, and it makes no difference to me whether the family is religious or not. And in this case, I think it's especially important for us to call it out because the Duggar family has this history of trying to hide behind their religion to justify their problematic beliefs. And in my opinion, that's very harmful because a lot of those beliefs negatively impact people's mental health. And so we talk about that a lot here. So again, I want to be super clear. It's none of my business what people do with their personal beliefs or their religion. It's very possible for people to have a healthy and happy and enriching and life-giving relationship with religion. I've seen it done. It's something that I have talked with clients about and I do talk with people about generally, but the Duggar family is not that. And so I want to be super clear about that. If you're a religious person, please don't be in the comments being like, why would you attack me like this? I'm not. This is not about you. This is about the Duggar family. But all of that said, let's talk about the Duggar family. I want to give a brief overview of the family so that we kind of know what we're talking about here. But I do also want to be clear, I'm not deep diving into the actual history of the family because there's a lot. If you are interested in an actual breakdown of like the timeline and the relationships between each of the family members and like the sort of who's who of the Duggar family, Jen from Fundie Fridays does a great job of this. So I'll link her channel in the description and I'll also put a thing up here. So if you want more details about that, I would highly recommend those videos because we're not really going to do that today. We're more so delving into like the topics and the subject matter underneath all of that. But again, just as a brief overview, Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar are the parents of the Duggar family, and they decided, based on their religious beliefs, to let God decide how many children they would have. So in what is a surprise to no one, they ended up with a fuckload of kids. They have 19 biological children, and they also have one child living with them who's not biologically theirs, but is like a family member. So there's 20 children in total, and they have had a reality TV series for many, many years. They had like specials and like sort of documentary one-off things, but they also had a TV show on TLC called 17 Kids and Counting, 18 Kids and Counting, 19 Kids and Counting, and then Josh Duggar, the oldest child, was involved in 2 separate scandals that broke at separate times, got the show canceled, and then TLC rebranded it as Counting On. So the family is no stranger to reality TV or to publicity generally, which is another reason that we are talking about this family, because these are not people who are just trying to mind their own business and live their religious life in the privacy of their own home. They have been very bold and very aggressive in sharing their religious and political views. And Jim Bob and Michelle also have a history of exploiting their children for monetary gain, and I think it's important for us to talk about that and to call that out. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The other thing here that's important for us to honor is that Jim Bob and Michelle have a history of problematic behavior. This is not your sort of average, like, Leave It to Beaver type of family, you know? Michelle has made transphobic robocalls to her local schools.
Hello, this is Michelle Duggar. I'm calling to inform you of some shocking news that will affect the safety of Northwest Arkansas women and children. The Fayetteville City Council is voting on an ordinance this Tuesday night that would allow men, yes, I said men, to use women's and girls' restrooms, locker rooms, showers, sleeping areas, and other areas that are designated for females only. I don't believe the citizens of Fayetteville would want males with past child predator convictions that claim they are female to have a legal right to enter private areas reserved for women and girls. I doubt that Fayetteville parents would stand for a law that would endanger their daughters or allow them to be traumatized by a man joining them in their private space. We should never place the preference of an adult over the safety and innocence of a child. Parents, who do you want undressing next to your daughter at the public swimming pool's private changing area? I still believe that we are a society that puts women and children first. Women, young ladies, and little girls deserve to use the restroom and any other women's facility in peace and safety.
Jim Bob ran for office on the campaign platform that child predators deserved the death penalty. And they have also said lots of problematic things about women's roles and, you know, about like a wife's job to be joyfully available to her husband at all times. Lots of very inappropriate, abusive, problematic beliefs that they just like are really very upfront with on national television. And so again, I want to be clear, we're not talking about people who are just like, well, we just want to be religious in our own house. No, like they're very aggressive. They're very upfront about it. And they also actively campaign to try to evangelize people into their religion. So for the purpose of easy digestion, I've broken this down into different sections. Y'all know that I am a wordy bitch. And so I think it's probably best that we piecemeal this out. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is parentification. Parentification, we've talked about on the channel before, but in case you haven't watched the Twilight video, which I'll put up there, parentification happens when a parent places parental responsibilities onto a child. This can happen in a practical sense, meaning like children who are responsible for feeding their siblings, dressing their siblings, picking their siblings up from school, or babysitting their siblings. But it can also happen in an emotional sense where children can be an emotional confidant to an adult. They can be treated like an emotional peer to their adults. Or to their parents. And then sometimes we have like a mix of both. The reason that we're talking about this is because Jim Bob and Michelle are like a fucking gold mine for parentification content. They just like put this on TV. Like they're not embarrassed of this. They actually talked about this as if it's like a cool parenting hack. Michelle uses something called the buddy system, and she actually describes this on their TV show, which again is just fucking wild to me because this woman has won a Mother of the Year award while also getting on TV and talking about how she just like refuses to be involved as an actual fucking parent. But the way that the buddy system works is that Michelle, after she has a baby, the new baby is her buddy, and so she takes care of that baby and manages all the needs for that baby until the baby is weaned. And then when the baby is no longer breastfeeding, Michelle passes that baby along to whichever child, female child, not male, female child, whichever female child's turn it is to get a new buddy. And so in that way we formed buddy teams. So each female child is responsible for like 2 to 4-ish children that are their siblings, that they have to meet their day-to-day needs. So they do things like dressing the kids, waking them up, managing their hygiene, which in the early days, by the way, before they lived in their big fancy house that the Discovery Channel paid for, they lived in like a 3-bedroom house with like 2 fucking bathrooms. And so the kids were competing to get in and out of the bathroom, all of these children. And so that was a sibling's job, to try and jockey their position to get into the bathroom to clean their siblings. Diaper changes, doing their fucking homeschooling, educating their siblings, and other things that are like really, really problematic. Sometimes discipline, which Jim, Bob, and Michelle are on record as using lots of really inappropriate and abusive discipline techniques, which we will talk about in a minute. But the buddy system basically is like a case study in what parentification looks like and why this is a fucking bad thing. Michelle actually details in their stupid book about how they use blanket training, which if you don't know, Michael and Debbie Pearl wrote a stupid book. It's an awful fucking book called How to Train Up a Child, in which it's like a handbook for how to abuse your children, essentially. It's filled with awful fucking advice, but also filled with instructions on how to be physically, emotionally, verbally abusive to your children. And blanket training is one of these techniques wherein you place a baby, like an infant, on a blanket, and anytime the infant tries to leave the blanket, you hit the child, sometimes with an implement, and some parents try to tempt the child off the blanket, and then will hit the baby, and it's awful, it's terrible. It's a disgusting fucking thing to do. Like, developmentally, this is a fucking nightmare, because all you're doing is breeding a sense of fear and discontentment and distrust between primary caregiver and child. But sometimes the children were responsible for doing this to their own siblings, it seems. And I think it goes without saying that that's a fucking problem, because it's a very traumatizing situation to be placed in, where you have to choose whether to injure one of your own siblings or to face the consequences of discipline for yourself. It's not appropriate for a parent to be doing that ever. It's not appropriate for a parent to be forcing children to bear adult responsibilities at all, but especially something that's emotionally traumatizing like this. It's one thing if parents want to subscribe to their own awful and abusive parenting techniques, which, to be clear, I'm not fucking signing off on that. That's still fucking disgusting, but it is like another level of disgusting for a parent to then force their children to dole out these abusive consequences on their own siblings. Really quickly, before we move on here to talk about the impact of parentification, I also just wanted to address that in the early years, the Duggar family, their lives weren't always as glamorous or like TV friendly as they are now. If you are only familiar with the Duggars from like the 18 Kids and Counting era, I would encourage you to look into what their lives looked like before that, because they did live in a very small home, and a lot of the older children have talked about how prevalent food insecurity was in their home, and how there was just this overall sense of scarcity because there was like a high competitive energy between the children for things like food, especially for things like attention, and again, like the bathroom thing like we talked about. And so I think that really also highlights the issue with the buddy system here, because not only are we having children who are responsible for very adult, very parental things in maintaining like the safety and well-being of their siblings, but they're also then placed in this position where you're actively competing with the kids who are on your buddy system, your buddy team, who you're supposed to be responsible for. And so it's almost like being a mom and a sibling at the same time, except that being the mom to your sibling means that you're being disadvantaged in practical ways also, because if you get a full helping of food, you might be taking food out of your younger sibling's mouth, and that's a very traumatizing and upsetting thing. And I want to be clear, I don't know for sure that this happened, but I think it's important for us to talk about it, again, based on, the accounts that older siblings have shared about food insecurity and those types of things. I would be surprised if none of the siblings walked away without some lasting impact of this situation. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if these types of dynamics existed in the household, because it's just a very problematic setup, and it really increases the odds for things like distrust, for discontentment, for a lack of safety, and for this overall feeling of fear to permeate a child's existence. And we should not be celebrating that as like Mother of the Year territory. And that's very much what's happening, or at least was happening, I guess, before the shit hit the fan. So I think it goes without saying that this is damaging to a kid's sense of identity. We Again, we talked in the Twilight video about the long-term impact of parentification, but just as a recap, it's very common for children who were parentified to grow up and become adults and then realize that there's a lot of identity development that didn't happen, to have this moment of like, oh fuck, I don't really have an identity of my own, and like I don't really know what I like or what I'm interested in. What are the things that stir up my insides and make me feel passionate about life? Like I never got the chance to explore those things because I was so busy being a surrogate parent to somebody else, or because I was so busy being a peer or a parent to my parent. And so that's problematic and painful and traumatizing in and of itself. But I wanted to talk about this in regards to the Duggar family because their family system and their religious culture is so insular and so committed to this like very exclusive attitude almost. Like there's very much this attitude of like outsiders are unsafe. We don't trust people who are either not our family or not from our own religion. And that is very much breeding grounds for a lack of normative development on its own. But then also when we combine it with the parentification, I think there really is, again, increased odds for these kids to end up with a disadvantage in terms of developing their own identity and having the opportunity to really explore, like, who am I as an individual? What are the things that matter to me? And maybe my values or my morals or beliefs differ from my family of origin, and maybe that's okay, because in typical, normal, healthy development, that's a very important process. But when we have this parentification and this, like, I keep wanting to say secular, that's not the word, this like insular environment, kids don't have the opportunity to do that. And again, it just really, it's like a compound effect where we have one problematic thing, we have another problematic thing, and these things are now meshed together to create an uber, like ultra problematic thing. And again, it's not funny. It's actually really sad, because when we look at like the outlet that these children have, they have their siblings, who most of them are parents to. They have the Bible, which I would venture a guess is also probably something with mixed emotions, because a lot of their religious beliefs are shrouded in fear and shame. They're allowed to learn an instrument, but it has to be an instrument that Jim Bob and Michelle have approved. They're not allowed to learn instruments that are like too loud or too upsetting to Jim Bob and Michelle. They've actually talked about this. The kids are allowed to learn piano or harp or other instruments that are like calm and soothing. Not allowed to learn like brass or woodwinds or, God forbid, percussion. That's not going to fly. So, that's like pretty much it. They can meet with other homeschool kids and other kids from their religious groups, but you're not allowed to have friendships outside of your gender or your sex that was assigned at birth. So girls can't be friends with boys and vice versa. And so, that's pretty much it. There's also a lot of encouragement for group time. It's frowned upon for kids, even if they are of the same gender or sex, to be off one-on-one. It's not really something that is encouraged. And so there's very little opportunity for, again, this like, I think we all have that experience as adolescents or young kids where we have these deep conversations with our friends or family members or like other peers, where we talk about, what we want our futures to look like, or what our value systems are, and we do identity development in this way. These kids didn't have that opportunity. That was never presented to them as a realistic option. And I'm honestly doubtful that even occurred to them, that was a thing that other people did, because this is just the way that we do things. And there is no opportunity to really discover that that's not normal until they get married and then are allowed to get social media, be exposed to life outside of their family. And even then, the female children in this family are fed this rhetoric and this message that when you get married, you're still not really allowed to have your own identity, because your identity now is to be a helpmeet. They actually say that. They say that you're supposed to be a helpmeet to your husband, and so your identity is supposed to be wrapped up in being a wife and now a mother, because they perceive marriage to be intrinsic with motherhood. It's the same. And so they don't even really get the chance to develop their own identity as adults either, because it's culturally and like religiously frowned upon to shirk your duty as a married lady and not do the like barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen thing. It's a really, really sad cultural environment when we dissect all of these pieces. And again, this is why it feels important for us to talk about it, because it seems like one small thing or maybe just a couple of small things, but, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, we have more things to talk about, but when we really zoom out of this situation and evaluate how all of these pieces compound together, it paints a very upsetting picture about the way that Jim Bob and Michelle are disadvantaging their children and the way that they have probably, maybe permanently, but certainly in a very poignant way, negatively impacted their children's lives. Okay, so the second thing that we're going to talk about is enmeshment. Enmeshment is a fancy therapy word for having poor boundaries or a lack of separation between two people, depending on what your therapeutic learnings are or what your degree program is in and like those types of things. It might be called different things. In my education, it was called enmeshment, but I know some people also call it emotional fusion. It's the same thing. Basically, what we're talking about here is when, in this case, a family has poor boundaries with one another, and especially when the parents have poor boundaries with the children, there's a lack of identity separation. And so, especially in the Duggar family, what we see just by dissecting the TV show and looking at their public media, like the things that they choose to share with the public, it's very clear that the children perceive themselves as an extension of their parents and not as independent, autonomous individuals of their own. That's a fucking problem. We're gonna get into this in a kind of a deep way, so like everybody put your seatbelts on. Buckle up. I know that I keep harping on this lack of opportunity for individual identity development, but it is very important. The reason that I want to continue to talk about this, I know I'm harping on it a lot, but it's important because our individual identity development impacts a lot of areas of our life. And when parents make the decision to hinder their children's opportunity to develop their identity, they're impacting that child and the relationship that that child will have with other people for the rest of their life, potentially, if they're not going to go to therapy and work on it, which, like, let's be honest, Jim Bob and Michelle did not create a safe environment for them to go to therapy. And it is especially fucking disgusting to me that Jim Bob and Michelle did this not out of ignorance, not out of a lack of resources, or because they're a family who grew up in poverty or didn't know any better, or there was generational trauma and they're doing the best that they could with the circumstances that they had. They could have done better. They chose not to because it was convenient for them to hinder their children and to not provide them with the appropriate opportunities for identity development so that they could continue to fuck off, literally and figuratively, make more babies and run for office and, I don't know, do whatever the fuck Jim Bob and Michelle do all day. That, I think, is especially the thing that really sticks in my craw as a therapist and a clinician when we talk about this issue, because these are the issues that I help people work through all the time. And I do think it's important to honor that there is nuance here. People can be a good person at the core, but also behave in ways that negatively impact their children. And I want to talk about that. We've talked about it on the channel before, but it is so bothersome to me when parents run around patting themselves on the back in this very public way, like Jim Bob and Michelle have, for being like Mother of the Year and I'm a great parent and look at our big happy family, when actually what they're doing is perpetuating this message that's very harmful, not only to their own children, but to all of the people who watch their show and don't understand or have the clinical background to break down why this is such a problematic behavior and are potentially mirroring that parenting style with their own children. It's so upsetting. It's so dangerous and just like really not okay. So let's talk about enmeshment a little bit. One of the things that I wanted to hit on here is that the core concept with enmeshment is that when we have enmeshment between individuals, but also within a group like we do with the Duggar family, where they're all kind of enmeshed with each other, any individual who makes a reach for autonomy is perceived as being hurtful to the group and to others. It's perceived as an act of emotional abandonment. Oftentimes the core beliefs that we form when something like this happens is that it's not safe for me to meet my own emotional needs, or that it's not fair for me to honor my emotional needs. That's so fucking abusive. That's so abusive. It's so inappropriate. And it's a very problematic dynamic for Jim Bob and Michelle to be running around and like setting up within their family and acting like this is normal. The other thing about this that I wanted to talk about is that it is normal for parents to feel a heightened connection to their kids. I don't have children, but I've heard it described as having your heart living outside your body, where there's just like a strong connection that you have to your child. It's normal for a parent to want their child to be involved in their life. Like, duh, you made them, they're a part of you, or you made the conscious choice to bring them into your family. And so that's normal. That makes sense. What's not normal is for children to have a sense of responsibility, or to feel emotionally responsible for their parents' well-being, either emotionally or physically. That's not okay. When we talk about normative family development, the typical ideal structure is that primary caregivers, in this case Jim, Bob, and Michelle, who are mom and dad, raise the children and provide shelter. They provide safety. They provide a place for emotional regulation. They provide all of these resources that they're like both legally and morally and ethically obligated to. And then as the child develops an identity of their own, maybe they do some exploration about, what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to have serious relationships? Maybe I want to get married. I don't know. They make these choices for themselves, and eventually, regardless of what their choices are based on their value system, they do separate from family of origin in some type of meaningful way. Sometimes this means getting married and moving out of the house and doing the love, marriage, and baby carriage thing. Sometimes it means moving out of the house and just like going to college or getting a studio apartment or moving in with roommates. But regardless, it's very important for a child to experience this change where you're no longer the like underling of primary caregivers, and you become an independent and autonomous individual who has their own values, their own beliefs, and their own life structure that's important to you, that you care about, and that you feel empowered and comfortable and safe to develop for yourself. Jim, Bob, and Michelle don't do this. The way that the Duggar family is structured is that the children are encouraged to get married and do the love, marriage, and baby carriage thing. However, I think it's telling that of the Duggar children who are married, one of them has moved any distance away from home. Most of the Duggar children still live close by their family of origin. Most of the Duggar children are still very enmeshed with Jim, Bob, and Michelle and their family and their siblings, and they all tend to kind of like glom together. We also have only seen one child develop any type of belief or value system that is in any way different from Jim, Bob, and Michelle. And if we're being honest, it's really not that different, but it is somewhat of a departure. That, in my opinion, is an indicator that Jim, Bob, and Michelle are not doing a good job of communicating this message to their children, that they're not only allowed but encouraged to do that identity exploration about what feels right to me, what matters to me, and what feels like a good fit, what feels supportive, what feels life-giving to me as an individual based on like my identity, not based on what would be pleasing to my parents and to my family of origin. There is very much this commitment to towing the party line in the Duggar family, and that is a fucking issue. It's not healthy. It's not healthy, and I'm telling you, based on my clinical knowledge, this is not the ideal way for a family to function. So this is an important moment for me to pause, because I'm sure that a lot of people are having this moment where you're going like, this doesn't really sound that different from my family of origin though. So like, I don't think that the Duggars are really doing anything that is that wrong, right?
Wrong.
The issue with enmeshment is that this is one of the more common dysfunctions to exist in families. It's a generational thing, it's a cultural thing. That's a deep dive in and of itself. We don't have time, or I don't have the energy to go there today. But the enmeshment thing is very common, and this is the reason that I wanted to talk about this, because I think as millennials and Gen Z are going to therapy and developing, higher levels of emotional intelligence and really doing the work to unpack this generational trauma, we're realizing that a lot of us have this sense of obligation to participate in these cultural norms that don't feel safe or healthy or life-giving for us. And enmeshment is very much one of them. So if you're a person who's resonating with this, I would very much encourage you to go to therapy or, to find some therapeutic resources that are a feasible option for you, because this concept of parents viewing their children as an extension of themselves is not fucking healthy. That's not okay. Parents who view children as an extension of themselves and as a tool to bolster their own ego are hurting their children. Plain and simple. I'm sorry. I don't mean to hurt people's feelings, but that is the way that it is. Because the message that you send to your child when you do that is that you exist to make my life easier. Your existence is there and necessary for me, not for you. I created you to be a part of this world to make me happier. No, that's not okay. If we are making the conscious choice to bring children into this world, it should be to create this tiny little human being who's like so cool and so awesome, and then give them the resources to develop their own life and develop their own value system, and then unleash them on the world to do the work of figuring out what they want from their life and what they want their family structure to look like and their relationships and their career goals and aspirations and all of those types of things. We should be viewing children as pre-adults, because that's what they are. They're human beings who are independent and allowed to separate from family of origin and become people in their own right. They're not a tool, they're not a pawn, they're not a thing for you to objectify and to use to glorify your own self. And that's very much the attitude that Jim Bob and Michelle have. For those of you who don't know, they're heavily associated with something called the Quiverfull movement, wherein they actually equate human beings to objects. I don't recall the Bible verse off the top of my head, and quite frankly, I don't care to, but the context is that, a man with many arrows in his quiver is blessed, meaning that the more children you have, you're very blessed. They basically view having a large family as creating more warriors in the army for God.
And I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
I'm not kidding. That's really what they believe. Bill Gothard is also, Gothardism, I guess, is another sect of their religious fundamentalism that they follow pretty closely, and they speak at length about this, about how it's, a Christian's duty to have lots of children so that they can go to the polls and vote for, conservative and religious values and create this religious revival to save the world.
Blessed be the fruit.
When we talk about objectifying children and seeing them as a tool to serve your own purpose, that's literally what Jim Bob and Michelle are doing. They made the choice to have more children solely because they wanted to serve their own cause. And I think that's a fucking problem, because all of their children, I don't agree with any of the fucking politics or moral beliefs that their children have, but all of their fucking kids deserve to have parents who gave a fuck about them as individuals, and deserve to have parents who were checked in with the things that mattered to those kids and gave them the opportunity to explore that and encourage them to chase after the things that made them excited about life. And they didn't. Jim Bob and Michelle viewed them as tools, and I think that's a goddamn shame. It's upsetting, and honestly, it's really fucking sad. The other thing that kind of dovetails with enmeshment is the concept of groupthink. I actually copy-pasted from my LCSW study exam the 8 key concepts of groupthink, because I was looking for a different definition and just happened upon this, and I was like, oh my god, it's the Duggar family. So I'm going to read those to you now, and then we're going to talk a little bit about groupthink, because I think it's an important thing for us to unpack in regards to the Duggar family, but also, again, their cultural and religious beliefs. The 8 key concepts of groupthink are as follows. 1. The illusion of invulnerability. Excessive optimism is created that encourages taking extreme risks. 2. Collective rationalization. Members discount warnings and do not reconsider their assumptions. 3. Belief in inherent morality. Members believe in the righteousness of their cause and ignore the ethical and moral consequences of their decisions. 4. Stereotyped views of those on the out. Negative views of the enemy make conflict seem unnecessary. 5. Direct pressure on dissenters. Members are under pressure to not express arguments against any of the group's views. 6. Self-censorship. Doubts and deviations from the perceived group consensus are not expressed. 7. The illusion of I can never say this word. Help me. Unanimity. It's like anemone. I can't say this word. Unanimity. I have several college degrees, but I cannot pronounce that word. 7. The illusion of unanimity. The majority view and judgments are assumed to be unanimous. 8. Self-appointed mind guards. Members protect the group and the leader from information that is problematic or contradictory to the group's cohesiveness, views, and or decisions. The reason that I brought this up and that I wanted to talk about it, like I mentioned before, is because I just happened upon it and I was like, oh my God, we need to talk about this. But also because this is actually a very common concept or like phenomenon to exist within religious fundamentalist circles. We see that it's especially common in Gothardism and in IBLP, which stands for Institute of Basic Life Principles, especially this idea of stereotyping people on the outside and rationalizing the negative choices that we make because we perceive ourselves to be like the righteous ones. This is like the epitome of the religious culture that the Duggar family belongs to, and this, I think, is a very helpful insight when we talk about some of the very problematic decisions that Michelle and Jim Bob have made in regards to responding to their oldest son's abusive behaviors, which we are going to talk about in a minute. But again, I think this just really highlights the issue with the structure that the Duggar family uses for child rearing and for their family generally, because it does bank on this idea of sheltering their children from the outside world so heavily that they don't even have the opportunity to learn that the things that the family are doing are not normal or are not shared views by other people, unless it's to talk about, you know, the people on the outside as being evil and of the devil and dangerous and, you know, people who are not safe for you. The other issue with this from a like psychological and developmental point of view is that within this community and this culture, the trauma that's happening, like the trauma in these communities is running rampant, regardless of whether it's overt, meaning like it's abuse that's happening and like being perpetrated from one person onto another person, or it's just like the trauma of witnessing or being parentified, for example. There's lots of trauma happening in these communities, and it's a very confusing environment for a child whose brain has not yet developed enough to understand what trauma is or what the fuck that means or to understand any of the nuance in this situation. That child is experiencing these signals from their body and from their nervous system that this isn't right. This doesn't feel good. Something is off here. Your body and your brain is trying to tell you, like, run. There's probably a fight or flight activation that's happening for a lot of these kids, but they're being so heavily moderated by their parents and fed this message that this is the way that things are, that you can't trust that impulse, that that's not safe for you, that that's of the devil, that's of Satan, and you can't trust your body or yourself or your nervous system at all. And it creates this division within a person where everything feels fucking unsafe. We talked about this a little bit with the Girl Defined video, in that like this is the closest that I'll ever feel to pity for people, not necessarily the Duggar kids. I do actually feel bad for them because this wasn't necessarily their fault, but people like Bethy and Kristen from Girl Defined, because it is a very traumatizing and confusing thing to live through this experience of recognizing on a nervous system and a body level that something is wrong, but your mind not allowing you to participate in the unpacking of that experience. And so we just shut it down. Just shut it down, repress within an inch of your life, and just like smile, sweetie. Just try and just make it better. That's such a haunting and terrible existence for a child to have to live through, and it hurts my heart again to think about the fact that Jim Bob and Michelle did this to their children purely because it was the most convenient option for them. It helped them serve their political and social and monetary goals. The third thing that we're going to talk about is the child abuse. Okay, the third thing that we're going to talk about is the child abuse. I want to be clear, if you've made it this far and you're like, wow, those trigger warnings seemed unnecessary, this is the section that's very important. I'm going to like read trigger warning everything. This section is very heavy. It's a lot. We're going to talk about some real shady and upsetting things. And so if you are at all sensitive to that, this is your opportunity to like get the hell out of here, because this section is a lot. First and foremost, I want to talk about the facts of the matter. Michelle and Jim Bob enabled their son Josh to not only abuse their other children once, but to continue to abuse them again, and to then go on to become a repeat offender whose offenses escalated in severity over time. It's important for us to talk about that because statistically in the research we know that a violent first offense increases the likelihood of future violent offenses, and so intervention is very key. It's very important, especially when we talk about like parents being on the receiving end of like the confession or the disclosure, that there be appropriate and like not severe enough, but you know, like accurate or appropriate, I guess. The only word, I use the word appropriate on the channel like 1900 times a video, but you know what I'm saying? An appropriate intervention that like suits the severity of the issue, and this is a very severe issue, which Michelle and Jim Bob did try to minimize, not only with their own children, but also on TV to save their own asses, to save their own reputation, to save their stupid TV show, to save the reputation of their son, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But to briefly recap the situation for those of you who are not aware, when Josh was a teenager, he molested 4 of his sisters and 1 family member, which, by the way, for the purposes of all the court documents and things like that, they were named as Jane Does 1 through 4, and I would like them to say that way in the comments if you guys want to discuss this. Please don't name anybody who is a victim of abuse. That's fucked up. Please don't do that. But Josh molested 4 of his sisters and 1 non-family member, and then confessed this abuse to his parents and to trusted family friends. And Michelle and Jim Bob very much minimized the abuse. When we talk about what the appropriate reaction is from a primary caregiver upon hearing that there was sibling SA, minimizing the abuse, not contacting the authorities, not providing all children involved with counseling, that's not the appropriate fucking reaction. It seems that Michelle and Jim Bob brought Josh to have like a stern talking to with a state trooper who, for what it's worth, was later, like years later, convicted on his own possession charges of CSAM. So that doesn't inspire confidence in whatever the fuck took place in that conversation. But that conversation took place after the statute of limitations had already expired. Michelle and Jim Bob were very careful to avoid disclosing this abuse in any way that would garner them further legal attention and necessitate legal action. Which is fucked up and disgusting. Josh then repeat offended, and again, the offenses continued to escalate in terms of severity. And again, Michelle and Jim Bob minimized the abuse. There was like a whole kerfuffle with the Oprah show. There's lots of discussion about this and the forums and lots of those things. We're not really going to get into that, but the long and short of it is that Michelle and Jim Bob did not disclose any details about this abuse, and they did not intervene in their own family about, in regards to this abuse until their hand was absolutely forced to. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because there are, research and statistically approved interventions on a primary caregiver's behalf about what to do when this type of abuse is happening in the home. And Michelle and Jim Bob not only didn't do that, but they refused to do that until somebody forced them to. So then later on, Josh had a number of different scandals, one of which was being outed for having a membership on Ashley Madison, which, if you don't know, is a website for people who are married and are seeking extramarital affairs and whatever, I guess. But part of that scandal was that Josh allegedly violently assaulted a sex worker. And then the most notable thing that I'm sure a lot of people are most aware of, in the last couple of months, it was revealed that Josh had downloaded and possessed CSAM, and the federal agents described it as one of the top 5 worst things that they had ever seen. And so again, this is why we're talking about the clear escalation of behavior over time, because when we go back to the original inciting incident, there was a very clear moment for intervention that could have happened from primary caregivers that did not fucking happen. And it's not to say that Michelle and Jim Bob could have saved everybody all the trouble and the trauma and the abuse, but it wouldn't have hurt. It certainly wouldn't have made it worse. We know from the research that early intervention and appropriate treatment in these types of issues can be very impactful. And so it is important for us to talk about this again, because the Duggar family has a history of trying to hide behind, or at least Michelle and Jim Bob especially have a history of trying to hide behind the religious views that they hold as an excuse for doing whatever the fuck they want to do as parents and as people and in their own political beliefs and whatever, and to say you're not allowed to chastise me or to pass judgment on me because we're religious. That's not what it is. We have the very clear data and statistical and research knowledge to know that there was an appropriate course of action and Michelle and Jim Bob didn't take it, and not because they didn't know better. Potentially they didn't know better, but not because there was a lack of resources or a lack of money. It seems like a lot of the motivation for Michelle and Jim Bob's shady fucking behavior is mostly motivated by money and a desire for fame, which is fucking disgusting. And again, very important for us to call out, because we're talking about the well-being of 19 fucking children. 19 minors were under their care, and this is the best care that Jim Bob and Michelle could muster up. That's so fucking inappropriate. For what it's worth, Jim Bob and Michelle did say that they provided the children who were assaulted by their brother counseling, but it's unclear what type of counseling it was. I am very doubtful that it was any type of evidence-based, like actual psychotherapy, and I would wager a bet that it had something to do with the Institute in Basic Life Principles. The Institute in Basic Life Principles is part of their weird culty religious beliefs that has lots of really fucked up teachings about many things, but about this specifically, I'm going to put a graphic up on the screen right now that it has apparently been used. It's unclear if it's still being used, but it is still up on their fucking website about why God let the abuse happen. Some of the answers to which are whether or not the victim was wearing defrauding or immodest clothing, whether the victim chose to be away from the protection of their parents, whether they were spending time with evil friends, lots of victim blaming, lots of disgusting rhetoric about the victim deserving the assault. And then in the follow-up category of like, okay, well, sure, maybe the abuse wasn't your fault, but they say that the graphic states that God compensates for your physical abuse by giving you a strong spirit. And so it's fine. Don't worry. God is using you through this experience to give you a better spirit. It's disgusting. It's upsetting. It is nonsensical also. But if that's the type of counseling that Michelle and Jim Bob sent their daughters off to, I'm very doubtful about the efficacy of that, about the impactfulness of that, about whether it was helpful to them. If anything, I would assume it just further compounded the abuse and probably compounded the feelings of shame and fear and distrust, because it's so heavily steeped in this purity culture values. Also, there was probably some level of shame dealt out about being damaged goods, and about having their purity stolen. And so like just all around very much a problematic culture to be a victim of abuse in, because there is almost no fucking accountability for people who are abusers in this culture. Bill Gothard is another large figurehead in the Duggars religious culture. Bill Gothard and his brother, I think, both had to resign from their positions within the church because the allegations of sexual assault and misconduct were so numerous that they had to resign from their own fucking churches. So if that doesn't give you an indication about what kind of fucked up, terrible trauma soup is happening in this religious culture, I don't know what does. And so again, I just am very doubtful about Michelle and Jim Bob's ability or motivation to provide their children with any type of meaningful intervention after the fact, if the best that they could muster up was gaslighting their children and minimizing the abuse and not addressing it until they were like literally forced to. When we talk about the impact of abuse, there are lots of like listicle things. I am going to link some things in the description. Actually, I'm going to link my LCSW study guide in the description also, because I think it's just a great resource for like sort of layman's psychology and like social work terms. So if you're just interested about that, I'll link that in the description. It's like $50 on Amazon. Not that it's a replacement for clinical knowledge, by the way. You still have to go to school and get a degree and all that stuff, but it is useful if you find it interesting. But there's lots of listicle stuff in there about the potential impacts of this type of abuse. A lot of them are pretty, predictable, I guess. That's kind of a fucked up thing to say, but a lot of them are pretty standard in terms of regular abuse anyways, or like typical childhood abuse. Things like depression, low self-esteem, feelings of fear, distrust, general shame and guilt, those types of things. Difficulty forming long-term relationships and trust in relationships. For CSA specifically, there is sometimes either a hypersexuality where children possess a not age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate knowledge about those types of activities, and there's a inappropriate level of interest in those activities, or potentially the opposite is true later in life for the victim. They can develop an aversion to those types of activities. Understandably so. Those types of activities feel unsafe and scary and bring up trauma triggers, and so there can be an aversion to that. It's also worth noting that statistically speaking, victims of CSA and child abuse generally can be more likely or more at risk for developing substance abuse issues or disorders and those types of things. It's not to say that all victims will undoubtedly develop that, but it is a risk factor that exists. So it's important to keep that in mind also. But all of that said, I think it's really important to talk about how difficult it is to really quantify what this abuse might have done to a person, because this is a very unique situation to exist. I think it's fair to say that the combination of being abused in the first place and then having your abuse minimized and like potentially the shame that existed within this household causing you to feel like you should keep your abuse in a secret, then having your abuse outed, then having it minimized, then having your abuse outed, and then having it minimized, and then not receiving any emotional support or like the counseling that you needed to work through these things, potentially like whatever counseling you did receive, probably just heaping more shame on top of that. Lots of purity culture bullshit that's probably heaping more shame on top of that. These weird family dynamics of like golden child and trying to protect the reputation of the family, all kinds of like weird competitive energy for attention, for love, for basic resources, and then having that abuse be outed by a media outlet that your family has indoctrinated you to believe is inherently adversarial and potentially like actually evil, and like of Satan, exposing all of that abuse, which could be a good thing because, you know, the abuse was not really dealt with in the first place, but it feels really bad because it's a trauma reactivation all over again. And again, it's like this lack of autonomy, not having a say in your own abuse, like all of that happening all over again. Very overwhelming, because then after that your parents get on TV and they minimize your abuse again, and like you have to get on TV potentially and maybe defend your abuser to like the whole world. That it's just this fucked up situation. Like the whole fucking thing is such a mind fuck. And I think it's very important for us to talk about that, because when we talk about like what the typical effects of CSA look like, we're sort of out of our depth here. Like this is a thing that probably doesn't exist in any other context that's quite like this one. And so it's a difficult thing to quantify. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not speaking for anybody because we don't know. And I don't want anyone to try to out the victims of abuse or like name them in the comments. So please don't do that. I know that some of them have publicly identified themselves before. I don't care. Please don't do that still. Because again, I want to try to navigate this issue in a way that doesn't heap any more trauma on top of these victims already. But I do just think it's important for us to have this conversation because, again, the dynamic that Michelle and Jim Bob have set up within their family, because of their religious views, but also because of their pathological need for attention and money from reality TV, has combined in such a way that the kids, and especially the female children, their needs are always last, always at the bottom of the heap. And it is so fucking disappointing because we're talking about 19 children whose needs are being routinely fucking ignored and put at the bottom of the priority list. And these children, I would be very surprised if none of the children absorbed this value of like, I don't matter, or my needs don't matter, or my need to feel safe doesn't matter. And this is the thing that, again, like grinds my fucking gears about Michelle and Jim Bob being celebrated as these like great parents and mother of the year and all this wonderful stuff. Like, no, this is not that. None of this is at all an exercise or an example of what healthy or appropriate parenting looks like. And so it's just all bad. It's all fucking bad. The other thing about this that I wanted to address here is kind of this compounding effect. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the enmeshment, the parentification, the dependency that Jim Bob and Michelle breed on the family of origin, and this like groupthink attitude that Jim Bob and Michelle encourage and celebrate is very much all sort of, again, combining to create this really terrible environment for normative child development. When we talk about supportive factors for children being like shame resilient and happy and developing a healthy sense of self and healthy self-esteem, and, you know, being successful in setting healthy boundaries in later relationships, and, you know, being these healthy, like self-assured, shame resilient adults, Michelle and Jim Bob did none of that. And all of these things, when they compound together, really paint a picture of a person or group of people who potentially are at risk for all different types of adverse outcomes. Like, we know when we look at like the adverse childhood experiences research, we know that these types of things, when they are combined in this way, create a statistical higher likelihood for mental illness, for the experience of further trauma and victimization later in life. Like, there's a whole host of negative outcomes that can happen from these types of things all combining in the way that they are. And that's not even including the fact that Michelle and Jim Bob have bred such a sense of distrust and distaste for science generally, but especially psychotherapy, counseling, and those types of things. And it is so fucking sad and disappointing that these kids who have been traumatized and gaslighted and treated like shit and deserved so much better, may not ever go to therapy to work on that or to unpack that or to feel better. Because Michelle and Jim Bob have trained them to feel distrustful and afraid and shameful about, the desire to do that or the need to do that, but also because they may not even have the insight or the wherewithal or the language to understand that that's something that they need in the first place. And so that we might have these people, and again, I'm not speaking for anybody, I'm not speaking with certainty, I don't know this, but I could see how these people might be walking around with this feeling of like, this feels bad and this doesn't seem right, and I don't know why this doesn't feel quite right. I can't put my finger on it, but I know that it's bad. But I also feel very much not allowed, not safe, not empowered, not okay to explore that, to discuss that with my life partner, to discuss that with my family. I don't feel that I have safe people that I can unpack that with. And I certainly don't feel that I have resources to further explore that or to heal that issue in the first place. And so it could very much just be this feeling of like awful bad all the time. And what are you going to do about it? Nothing, probably. Like, that's so haunting and so fucking upsetting, because again, I really want to highlight that these are not issues that are unworkable or that are like so far gone that you can't work on it. Like, these are pretty doable therapeutic goals for somebody to want to accomplish. And it is so frustrating to think about the disadvantage after disadvantage after disadvantage that Michelle and Jim Bob have heaped upon their children. And, if they hadn't done that, these kids might be living a very different emotional lives. So before we move on, generally, I want to talk about some prevention factors, some protective factors here, and also some resources in regards to the CSA conversation. For anyone who is a parent or planning to be a parent, or I guess anyone who just has interaction with children generally, it's also possible for CSA to come from parents. And so if you just are a person who has children in your life and you want to learn more about how to be a safe person, this is very important. If a child ever discloses this type of abuse to you, one of the most important things that you can do is to stay calm. I know that that's easier said than done, but it's very important for you to try and keep a lid on the emotion for the time being, because children can misinterpret your anger or your fear as being upset at them, which is not only traumatizing and shaming, but can also increase the odds that the child may recant those allegations later, and that can create a whole host of issues like legally and just it's hard. And so I do really want to encourage folks to try and stay calm and then process your own emotions about that with your safe people later, not in the presence of the child. The other thing that is like so above all else important is to stress to the child that you believe them, that you know that they're telling the truth, because the likelihood of these allegations being false is so astronomically fucking rare. It is I cannot stress this enough, absolutely astronomically rare for children to make this shit up. It almost doesn't happen. And so if a child is disclosing these things to you, I really want to encourage you to stress to the child, thank you for telling me I'm a safe person. We're going to report this to the appropriate authorities and I believe you. That's one of the most important protective factors that there are. So please, like, if you don't do anything else, fucking do that. I think it also goes without saying that the abuse needs to be reported in some form or fashion. Authorities need to be contacted and it needs to be reported in the appropriate legal way. There's also lots of nonprofits and like local organizations and charities and things like that that will help families work through these issues. So if you need support, if you need resources, if you need, like legal support, things like that, definitely don't hesitate to like just Google near me kind of stuff. That can be a great resource for you too. I am going to link some stuff in the description generally about all of the things that I'm saying, by the way, but just food for thought, it can be helpful to Google local resources as well. I do also, just as a side note, want to encourage anybody who has a connection to this type of abuse, adult, family member, victim, or otherwise, everybody deserves to go to counseling and to have a space to process how you feel about that. Everybody deserves resources. So I do really want to encourage everybody to utilize whatever resources are available to you, because it's very important. This is like real heavy, scary stuff, and like we need space for that. In terms of prevention factors, one of the most important things is teaching children about bodily autonomy and healthy body boundaries. Not forcing kids to participate in physical affection that they don't want to is really key here. So not forcing kids to do the thing where they kiss family members goodbye when they don't want to, or force them to give hugs and things like that. It sends this message that their body doesn't belong to them and that other people can be in their body space without their permission, and that's counterproductive to the goal. Another important thing here is teaching children the scientific and anatomical names for body parts. It is important, if allegations are ever made, for for children to have the appropriate language and verbiage for those allegations to make sense to the relevant authorities. And so I know that's kind of a fucked up and sad thing, but it's true. And so I do really want to encourage people to teach their children the appropriate names for their body parts. Another thing that can be helpful here is differentiating between secrets and surprises. I've seen people talk about this in terms of like surprise parties, or like, you know, a surprise being a secret that will eventually be revealed for the purpose of making a person feel happy or feel excited or feel joyful, and secrets being something that are not supposed to happen for children. The reason being that secrets are a common form of abuse in this area. It's a common issue for people who are victims of CSA to be told by their abuser, you need to keep this a secret. And so communicating to children that secrets are not allowed. Sometimes we keep surprises for like birthdays or presents or things like that, but we don't keep secrets. That can be a helpful differentiation. And then also just generally empowering and encouraging your children to say no and to have clear communication with you about anything that's going on that they feel weird about, anything that they want to talk about. That communication and open discourse is very powerful. The last thing that I want to talk about here is the stranger danger rhetoric. This is very much unhelpful. Again, it's one of those issues. I know that this is a hard thing to hear, but the odds of your child being victimized or a child being victimized by somebody that they don't know is exceedingly rare. The vast majority of abuse is perpetrated by somebody that the child knows, and somebody that the child knows well, typically somebody that the child trusts. And I know that that's a fucked up and scary thing to hear, but it is important for us to talk about, because when we give children this idea that the only unsafe people are strangers that we don't know, it can create a lot of confusion if that abuse comes from somebody who is a family member or somebody that they love. So having those clear conversations about boundaries in our body space, regardless of who the person is, can be very important. The fourth and final thing that we're talking about is Anna Duggar. This might seem like a little bit of an odd thing to talk about. For those of you who don't know, Anna Duggar is Josh Duggar's wife, but I want to talk about this not so much because I particularly care about defending Anna specifically, but more so about like the theoretical identity factors that Anna holds. One of the things that's really important in this section, I think, is to be super clear. I'm not defending Anna specifically. There, in my opinion, is not really a good enough reason to continue to defend and support somebody who is a child predator and a life ruiner. So I very much disagree with a lot of her actions. I also just very much disagree with her personal, moral, religious, ethical, political code and beliefs. We're not the same. Like, I don't agree with a lot of her beliefs, clearly. However, I do think that it's important for us to talk about this because Anna has been labeled as lots of things, both by the media and by the Fundie snark community and the Duggar snark community, and I want to unpack that a little bit. First and foremost, I think this is just my personal opinion. Most of this is my personal opinion, this section anyways, but I think there's a lot more sexism especially in regards to Anna than most people are willing to admit. And I know that that's probably an unpopular opinion.
Sounds controversial.
Sorry, but I do think, especially within like the sort of Reddit realm of like Fundie snark and Duggar snark and those types of things, that there tends to be a fixation on the actions and opinions of the women in these cultures more so than the men. And I am curious about to what degree that is related to sexism, because in my opinion, it's important for us to honor that within their own culture, Anna is not a person with a lot of social power. I think it's a little bit disingenuous to critique the actions and opinions of a woman within this culture without also at the same time honoring the oppressive and patriarchal norms that sometimes create a need for these women to behave in these ways. And again, I'm not saying that she's a good mother. I'm not defending her. However, I do very much disagree with this rhetoric that Anna is either A, a person who knows better, or B, is a person who has the opportunity to leave or start over or make some type of big, meaningful life change. I feel pretty confident based on my clinical skill set and based on just the information that we have like freely available to the public to speculate that Anna's level of denial and Anna's lack of emotional insight is probably more severe than people are willing to recognize or able to recognize because again, we've already talked about a lot of the negative family structures that exist within the Duggar community, and these are not things that are necessarily specific to the Duggars. These are IBLP values, these are Quiverfull values, these are Gothardism values, and so it's very likely that Anna was also raised in a household with these values and that she has absorbed these things from childhood. And so I think it's very important for us to keep that context in mind when we talk about her ability to make decisions as an adult woman and to appropriately survey her options when we talk about leaving somebody who is an abuser. I don't know. Again, this is just me speculating, but I don't know that Anna has the emotional insight or the emotional intelligence to accurately label her husband as an abuser at all. And I want to be clear, I'm not labeling anybody as an abuser. I can't speak for anybody, and I'm certainly not diagnosing anybody. We are only speculating based on the information that we have freely available to the public. And I don't want to label her husband as someone who is definitively abusive to Anna. We do know that Josh has been abusive to other people, but again, I am very doubtful that Anna has the ability to appropriately survey the options at her disposal because of all of the disadvantaging factors that exist within this community. For example, let's talk about the IBLP umbrella of protection. I'm going to put a graphic up on the screen right now for you guys to see. This is a weird, fucked up diagram that IBLP uses to teach about the natural order of the household. The way that they speak about this is that God has ordained a specific way for families to work, and there's like a nature's way that families and the household is supposed to work, with men being the household or the head of the household. Women are designed biblically to be a helpmeet, meaning that their job is to be subservient to a husband, and then children are underneath that. The reason that I bring this up is because the belief within these religious fundamentalist circles is that a woman without a male head of the household leaves herself vulnerable to attacks from Satan, and her children vulnerable to attacks from Satan. Not only is she vulnerable to attacks from Satan, but it's almost this the way that they speak about it is almost this victim blaming attitude, as if it's a shameful thing, and as if the mother would be intentionally creating temptation for Satan to abuse or hurt her and her family and her children, because you're so far outside of God's ordained order for the family system that it's you're gonna get struck by lightning, you're gonna be smited by Jesus for not having a male head of household. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, and I am sort of kidding, but not really. The reason that I bring this up is because I think there is an important thing from IBLP's actual fucking website for us to talk about in regards to what happens when an umbrella is torn. Basically what happens when the male headship fucks it up. IBLP speaks to what that means, so I'm going to read it to you. Individuals in authority need to embrace their God-given responsibilities by protecting, leading, and providing for those in their jurisdiction. If an umbrella is torn or broken, it can't provide the protection it was designed to give. In the same way, when leaders fail, the people under their jurisdiction often suffer the consequences along with the leader. When a leader fails, he is no longer protecting those under his care, and therefore they are exposed to the attacks of Satan. Those under the authority may feel the impact of the leader's failure so acutely that they notice the problem even before the leader himself is aware of it. The attacks of the enemy can be manifested in many forms, including health problem, overwhelming temptations, unusual cycles of doubt or depression, nightmares, and unexplained conflicts. The cause and effect sequence should motivate leaders to make wise decisions and live uprightly, because even their hidden sins can bring harm to those under their care. It also motivates those under their authority to know their leaders and to help them make wise decisions by offering encouragement and making appeals when necessary. The subtext here is very much that even when the male headship fails, the female helpmeet is partially to blame as well, because it's her job to know her male headship well enough to understand when he might be failing and to offer encouragement and to make appeals when necessary. I would not be surprised, given their cultural context and given their very victim blamey rhetoric, if Anna is being fed all kinds of bullshit from her family, from Jim Bob and Michelle, from her own fucking brain because she's been indoctrinated by this cult to that, informs a sense of shame and a sense of guilt about her being partially to blame for the sins of her husband. Another important piece of IBLP culture for us to talk about is the existence of vertical morality, but the concept of vertical morality refers to this idea that within IBLP and the Duggars' religious beliefs, sins are considered morally equivalent. They perceive, like, for example, all sexual sin to be the same. So lusting after somebody who's not your wife and assaulting someone, same thing. They don't really differentiate those things because in their mind, all sin is sin and we're all sinners. And again, the we live in a fallen world thing and everything's terrible and we're all sinners and everything's awful. And so there is very little room for nuance in this community. So I would not be surprised if Jim Bob and Michelle and Anna and potentially other family members are walking around with this attitude of how dare all of these secular or not religious like us sinners condemn us for a regular sin when they're all sinners as well, or potentially worse sinners than we are because of their belief in this vertical morality. It's also important for us to talk about the way that their particular religious sect functions, because the belief for Gothardism and IBLP and their independent fundamentalist Baptist whatever is that in order for there to be the rapture, they have to evangelize enough people for God to save the earth. And so there is a fervent energy with which they try to evangelize and convert new people to the religion. That's why Michelle and Jim Bob were so aggressive about their TV shows, but they described it as their ministry. This was their way of trying to spread the gospel to all of us heathens who were watching TV at nighttime. Their belief system is such that in order for there to be a rapture, we have to either convert enough people so that God will smile upon us and then we can all go to heaven, or maybe I just meet my own merciful death before that happens. But either way, I got to be out here doing the good works, trying to convert as many people as humanly possible. That's my goal here within this religion. So people within this belief system are actually very upfront about the fact that life on earth is not meant to be fun per se. There's very much a suffering porn kind of view that they have about life and about life on earth being intended to be bad because life in heaven is going to be great. And so who really cares if life here is bad? That's not the point. They view life here almost as a penance for the world is fallen and everything sucks and it's all bad and whatever. So it doesn't really matter. And there is, again, very much this focus and fixation with happily bearing the suffering that God has designed us to bear here on earth. And so when we keep that in mind with this cultural context, again, I would not be fucking surprised if the messaging that Anna is being fed behind the scenes is that this is her particular cross to bear. Her life without her husband and because of his sin, probably because it's your fault, is potentially her life's cross to bear, and maybe even, I don't know, a good opportunity for her to evangelize new people, because if Anna can do it, then you can do it. And don't worry, I can raise my 7, 8 fucking kids without a husband, and my life is a fucking shit show, but I still love Jesus, and so I'm super religious, and so you should be super religious. It's this very strong MLM energy. I know a lot of you have pointed this out before. It is kind of that, where I really would not be shocked to hear that that is the type of conditioning that she has been fed her whole life, but also the type of encouragement that she's being given behind the scenes now about how now is not the time for you to default on your faith or to, falter in your walk with Christ. Now is the time to double, triple, quadruple, quintuple down on your faith and really show all of those fucking heathens who are waiting for you to fail that you are stronger than ever in your faith. So when people use this very victim blaming, very shaming rhetoric to talk about Anna, I think it's both ill-informed and also upsetting because we're talking about a person who has been so traumatized and so indoctrinated that I don't know that she even has the ability to look outside of her own cultural context, let alone accurately survey that what's happening to her is actually very inappropriate and very traumatizing. The point that I'm trying to make here is that sometimes people who have been traumatized in this way don't know how to do better for themselves, let alone for the people that they are responsible for. And so while I am not a fan of Anna Duggar, I do think it's upsetting and inappropriate to throw the book at somebody who is very much a victim of the culture in which she finds herself. I think it also sends a very upsetting message to people who are trying to recover from fundamentalism and people who are trying to recover from this type of trauma, because it sends the message that we are going to throw the book at you for any bad decisions that you made while you were entrenched in this culture, because we think that you should have known better. And even if you didn't have the resources or the availability to make those better choices, we're still going to look down our nose at you and we're still going to shame you and judge you. And it again reinforces this rhetoric, this persecution complex, that us on the outside are bad people, that we are unsafe, that we are mean and hateful and evil, and we are not an accepting community for people who are trying to leave this cult. So I want to encourage people to reevaluate the language that they are using to speak about Anna and her family and people who are victims of this cult and culture generally, because I think it's doing a disservice to people who have already left and are trying to recover, but it also really doesn't suit the purpose of trying to send the message that life outside of this cult can be healthy and safe and okay, and you can even have religion and a life that is religious and a relationship with God and Jesus that doesn't have to be fucking this. I know that it feels really good to label people in clear black and white ways, because especially when something like this happens that's horrifying and upsetting and shocking, the tendency is to want to put people into categories and to make sense of it all. But I do really want to encourage people to sit in the gray area here, because this is one of those things that exists with a lot of nuance, and it's important for us to honor that. The other piece of that I wanted to talk about is in the realm of trauma recovery, because one of the most common objections that therapists get from people who are trying to recover from the abuse that their parents dealt, or abuse or neglect that their parents dealt them, is that, well, sometimes we had our good moments too, or my parent wasn't all bad, or maybe they didn't know better. And so, my abuse didn't look like this caricature of a mommy dearest film, or, a prolific serial killer. And so, who am I? How dare I label my childhood as traumatizing or upsetting because it didn't look that way? And it is very damaging for us to reinforce this rhetoric that trauma is only valid when parents are only a bad person. I think it's really important for us to be clear that Anna may be a good mom to her kids sometimes. She may be warm and kind and validating and supportive of those kids, but she may also, and she is also, being a person who is traumatizing her children. She is also behaving in ways that will be negatively impactful of those kids' lives for the rest of their lives, until those kids go to therapy or figure out how to unpack that. And both of those things can be true at the same time, and that it doesn't take away from the potential traumatic impact on those kids. When we say shit about abuse having to look a certain way, or about Anna only being a bad person, it sends the message to regular ass people who are out here who are not Anna Duggar, who are not Anna Duggar's kids, that because your abuse didn't look like this, that it's not real, that it's not valid, and that you're not sick enough to go to therapy, or that abuse isn't bad enough for you to unpack in therapy, or that no one will take you seriously. And that's not the case. I want to be super clear as a therapist who helps people work through shit like this all the time. Your abuse is always valid enough. It's always bad enough. It's always worth unpacking if it's bothering you. So please, I want everyone to know, if there's no other takeaway that you have from this video, it's that any level of trauma that you've experienced in your lifetime is worth working through if you want to. And there are lots and lots of therapists who are safe people for you, who are more than willing to help you do that work. So again, I really want to be clear. I don't think it's helpful, in my opinion, as a clinician, as a person, as a therapist, to lambast Anna as this person who is single-faceted, only bad, only exists in this way, because it's just simply not the case. I think there's a lot of nuance there, and I do really want to encourage people to honor that. That said, I know that this video was a lot, and there was a lot that we covered today. I really want to say thank you if you've made it this far, because I know we really unpacked a lot here. I hope that you guys enjoyed this format. It was fun for me, I'm not gonna lie, to have the opportunity to really delve deep into these topics. So if you like this format, please let me know. Leave me a comment, letting me know what your thoughts and feelings are, because we are planning to do more of them. I have talked endlessly about the Teal Swan video, about the Troubled Teen Industry video, and then I told you guys last week, I'm just spilling all my secrets, about Nicole LaPera's video. So we have more deep dives that are coming, so hopefully you fucking liked it. But anyways, let me know what your thoughts and feelings are in the comments, and then like the video if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, because we do content about fundamentalists and stuff like that about once a month. So if you want to see more of this, subscribe, and then make sure you click the notification bell so you know when this is coming, and then share the video. And then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.